Want your brand to be seen and be remembered? Effective campaigns need both. JCDecaux's high-quality billboard sites in premium locations nationwide offer brands powerful and visible stages for emotive, impactful and influential storytelling. Find out how JCDecaux can help your brand be seen and be remembered at www.beseenberemembered.co.nz. Nau mai, haki mai, ki ada fold, e mihi nei, ko Duncan Grieve, tōku ingoa. My guest today is Andrew Jeffries, he's two things, and this is an interview of two parts, and they're both kind of closely linked and almost at war with one another, and that's what I really, really enjoyed about today's chat. So his day job, he works in a technical capacity, overseeing the technical side of iHeartRadio, which is the biggest radio company in America, huge in digital, huge in terrestrial, and he's had a number of roles. He lived in LA for a long time, came back sort of around the start of the pandemic and lives in Blenheim. So the first half of the conversation is about his career, his day job career, working in radio in London, starting in Wanganui, just having a very varied, very high-level career in radio and watching it transition to digital. And, so there's a lot of really, to me, fascinating views to have, to a New Zealander from a small town going to the biggest cities and markets in the world during this incredibly challenging and opportunity-rich time in media that has been the last few decades. But he's also, for the last 14 years, had like a super weird night job, and where his days are dominated by data and research and, aggregating audiences across hundreds of markets, he's also had this thing called BrianFM, which almost, and we dig into this, it seems to contradict all of the rules that he's laid out and abided by in his day job. It's got no DJs, it's got no ads as we would know them. The playlisting is all over the shop. It's sort of very made up by him and a group of friends, and you'll hear very incongruous things alongside one another all the time. There's a really great story by Chris Schultz on the spin-off from a couple of years ago that sort of digs into more of the musical side of it. But I wanted to talk about the business of it because, New Zealand radio is dominated, in a commercial sense, dominated by two companies. MediaWorks is one and NZME is the other, and they collectively, they all certainly present like they own the whole of the commercial market. It's not quite true. But in many markets it is, except that BrianFM now covers the whole South Island, and it's sort of creeping its way. I think he used this great analogy in Schultz's piece, creeping its way like gorse up the North Island. And, radio frequencies are not cheap, and the infrastructure, building audience, none of that stuff is, but he's just figured out a way to do it with this radio brand that's very interesting, very different, and very sort of music-centric in a way that the tightly formatted and sort of tested stations just can't really compete with. And the back half of the interview is exploring BrianFM and the way he's gone about building that and why. I had a lot of fun with this conversation. It came about at very, very short notice, just hearing that he was in town, but like a fascinating, very kind of one of those New Zealand original type media stories. So that's today's episode of The Fold. Enjoy. Kia ora, Andrew. Welcome to The Fold.
Hey, thank you very much. Nice to be here. the surprise.
Well, I mean, I just sort of saw that or heard that you were up, and just thought, I'm going to grab this. This is a story we need to tell on here.
I was kind of surprised you actually wanted to have a conversation with us, because at the end of the day, are we that interesting? I don't know.
I mean, but I feel like that's Brian's shtick.
It is the Brian FM shtick to be not interesting, but rather compelling. And I don't know how those two things necessarily cohabitate, but they do.
That's exactly right. But what I wanted to do is kind of cleave this thing in two and talk about your career in radio, particularly probably the back half of it, before we move into Brian FM, which it sort of feels like this thing you sort of built in your backyard kind of thing, while being a high-flying executive in the other.
That pretty much sums it up. It is a backyard project, yes.
So start with with how kind of radio got its hooks into you, and maybe pick a role which kind of galvanized you and sort of changed your trajectory, I suppose.
Okay, so I started in radio in Wanganui a long stint ago, as the grey hair shows, at River City Radio, and I walked past the college, walked past the radio station when I was at boys' college. I mean, I kind of liked this radio thing. I used to live in just a little place near Hunterville in the North Island, and there wasn't a lot of television, and there was a lot of radio stations you could pick up and listen to, and it just became my companion. And I loved the music. I thought the magic of what was happening in the studios and what people were doing and the fun they were having. It just felt like that's something that at some point in time I'd quite like to have had a little part to play in. And walking in a radio station was this mysterious thing. There's just funny people and music people and news people, and they were just all doing this thing. And look, you watched a WKRP back in the day, and it was kind of like that, but touchable and tangible and next door. So when I walked past one day, I walked in and said, hey, I'm technically minded. I mix lighting at the college. I do sound at the college and blah, blah, blah. Can I help in any way? And I literally had a managing director at the time at the radio station, Dave Hill, who, with love and respect to Dave, still chat to him regularly, was rather looking to find ways to keep costs down. And I was a potential to keep costs down. So he sat me in a production studio and went, here's Casey Kasem's American Top 40. Play that off records and play commercials between it, and then do the next track and the next set of commercials, the next track, and time it out to the top of the hour, and you got a job. And that was literally it. That was my introduction to radio. And then that show went from 80-40 to Blackie's other top 30 or 40, whatever it was, can't remember. But it was a 3-hour show instead of a 4-hour, and there was a whole hour at the end of the show that we had to fill before we joined the network of the time, which started at 6 p.m. So I ended up doing a show on air, and that was a whole different thing. I didn't expect that. Yeah,
I mean, but I guess it does show there's, if I think about BFM, where I had a brief role and so on, there's something about both how sort of, massive radio is in terms of its audience and the way that people relate to it, but also how weirdly accessible it can be as a way to sort of, people can and often have just strolled in the front door and announced themselves.
And it's become a wonderful career and a wonderful way for our family to do what our family's done around the world. It's been fantastic for us.
So, I guess when I look at your career, your CV, it feels like that time in London with Capital was potentially quite a big job to move from, having been in the relatively provincial New Zealand side before that.
There's a lot of accidents in our career. I'd like to say it was carefully planned, but no, it's all happenstance. We moved from Wanganui to Marlborough, which is where we live now, and worked at Radio Marlborough, and then bounced up to Hawke's Bay, and then down to Timaru. I did a morning show, and I was on air all those markets. And then More FM were looking to launch into Dunedin, 98 More FM, and I worked with the team to put that radio station together and launch that one in Dunedin. And we were there for a few years and had a fantastic time there. But we'd also travelled a little bit internationally during that time, myself and my wife, and we wanted to see what the rest of the world had to offer. And we thought it was time for us to go and do a 1 year, like all Kiwis do, a 1 year OE that turned after 3 weeks of living in the UK, ended up working full-time for the Capital Radio Group, as it was at the time, and bounced around in that market for 10 and a half years, and then moved to the US. So it was purely and simply, good people, right place, right time, right attitude, and knocking on the door at the right time. Again, it's walking through the door of River City Radio was one thing, walking through the door of 95.8 Capital FM in London was another. It's just random how these things happen.
Well, you still have to walk through the door, which is probably a barrier some people don't get through. tell me about that time at Capital in a giant, very sophisticated market,
Scary.
like London.
Yeah,
And the roles that you kind of did, because obviously, like you've got the technical side, you've done some on air, but programming was a big part of what you did at iHeart. So how do you sort of round out the career?
I think if I wouldn't use the word talent, as a DJ on the radio, I was average. I could do here's some local community information. Occasionally I may accidentally say something funny, but it wasn't planned. It more, again, happened. And then I went to the next thing, and I was good technically at putting things together. And I liked the idea of how things fitted together and worked together to create a product. And so there was a period of time when I was in Hawke's Bay and the network asked if I wanted to go and do a morning show in Timaru, there was a piece of me that could not think of anything that I wanted to do less. There was no desire to do morning shows. I'm not that person. I'm not that good. But what I did realize is I really enjoy programming radio stations and working with people to get more out of them than what I can deliver myself. I've got my own mental limitations and physical limitations or whatever they happen to be. But talking to other people I was working with in Hawke's Bay, hey, have you tried this? Have you done this? And they managed to carry it off where I couldn't. So I could help coach them through that. And I wanted to go through a morning show specifically so I could talk to other morning shows at some point in my career because I decided programming was the path I wanted to go down.
When you say programming, just for our listeners, do you want to unpack what that means in this context?
It means looking after the brand of the radio station. It could be working on the music policy. It could be working on the audience targets. It could be working on the imaging and the pieces that go between the songs. It's working with the DJs to make sure they are on target with their conversation topics to be focused on a specific listener or a specific subset of listeners or a region or whatever it happens to be. And then you've got the physical branding, the visuals and stuff like that people are used to dealing with, logos and whatever else. And then you look at the other side of things, and it's the business side, which is how do we find a way to take this wonderful audience that we've amassed and monetize it? Because at the end of the day, whilst we all love the creative approach, it doesn't pay the bills. You've got to find a way to monetize those things. And that was a key part. So I enjoyed all those pieces. But going back to the morning show piece, if I hadn't done that, I don't think I could ever relate to a morning show that I was trying to have a coaching session with or a conversation with when I can't say, hey, I know what it's like when your alarm goes off at 3:30 or 4 in the morning and you're tired and you get through work and you're done by 10 o'clock, but you're not done by 10, you're tired still. And then you've got the rest of your day. And then you go home and your family expects you to still be going at like 9, 10, or 11 at night, and you go to bed and you wake up and those kind of conversations, unless you've done it, you don't know it, you don't feel it.
And the relentlessness of it, right?
Absolutely. And the endless creativity that it requires to maintain any caliber of broadcast quality. It's not an easy job. I take my hats off to anyone who's been in those roles for long periods of time. So
that's what you ultimately ended up doing on a bigger stage in London?
In the UK, it was all about programming the radio station, putting them together, finding a way to – there's a property, an example, or a radio station that was in a marketplace. The first one outside of London I worked in was Southampton and Fareham. Was based in Fareham. Southampton and Portsmouth is the area it covered. And it was a radio station. It was one of two in the market that they owned, and it was not doing well. And I was given a project to go and find a way to make that work better. And so I put a lot of research systems in place, and oddly enough, it turned itself around. We say that very simplistically. There's a little bit more to it than that.
So is there a particular format within radio where you feel most at home?
No. Because my tenure in the US, I had 140 stations reporting into me from LA, San Francisco, Dallas, Houston, Minneapolis, Denver, San Diego, Portland, Seattle. They were from all over the place. And inside of each of those clusters of stations, there were hip-hop formats, there were talk formats, there were sports formats. Am I an expert at all of those? No, I'm absolutely not. Can I help people in the skills that they have, the communication skills they have? Can I help them bond with an audience? Can I help them focus on an audience? Can I help them with the sound of the radio station to hit an audience? Once we identify what that audience is, and how do we go about that, and the processes and systems to put in place to do that, if you can master that to some degree, you can just about go to any format. It doesn't really matter. But obviously, if you're a specific expert in one field, it means you're going to be more au fait with it than others. But it doesn't mean you can't. It's not about me having all the answers either. Most of the time, all I'm doing is living and breathing and working with the team to help them find the best strategy. I'm asking questions, they're giving me answers, and then we often go off in a different direction.
So there seem that these two big jobs and big leaps that you've made, and the move to iHeart, which if capital was a leap up, that must have been just orders of magnitude.
There was many things that happened in the UK that were just so beneficial for us. I think I got labelled the fix-it guy, kind of like the general handyman who can come around and you've got a plumbing problem or an electrical problem or you need your wall jib to stop or something like that. If you turn that into Radio Sense, I could pretty much do that, and they relied on that for multiple markets throughout the UK.
Do you think that, because I've had this sort of half-formed theory for a while, that because in New Zealand the media markets, and actually this is true across more industries than just media, it's quite small. The teams are much smaller, so you specialise less. You're often doing a few different jobs, and so there's a kind of a broad familiarity. Like it's almost like how a CEO will be moved through different areas of the business to familiarise themselves with them. We do like a really weird New Zealand version of that, where you kind of have to do like whatever your job description is kind of irrelevant because you're going to have to do whatever needs doing.
I think you're 100% correct.
And then you go to a bigger market, and that's like, well, who's this freak?
Who can kind of do a lot of different things, not necessarily a specialist in all of them, but at least comfortable and competent enough to have a conversation with experts in those fields that ask the good questions and help align people and build a team and build an atmosphere and build a community. And then you're off to try and build radio stations with that.
So tell me what it was like to arrive at iHeart. It came out of Clear Channel.
It was indeed, yeah. When I first moved to the US, it was still Clear Channel, yeah.
And we know it locally as a part of the NZME kind of stable of brands. It's their sort of digital audio home. I think that's probably the infrastructure behind it. But it's a wholly different and infinitely larger beast in the US. Just kind of explain to those who only know it locally what it really is.
Yeah, the iHeartMedia machine in the US is a phenomenal company. It came from the roots of Clear Channel, as you mentioned. The iHeartRadio brand is a part of the iHeartMedia company. It's the public-facing digital platforms and music platforms and talk platforms for 850 terrestrial radio stations across the country. The company is iHeartMedia is the largest podcasting company in the US. It is the largest events company. It has outdoor. It has you name it. It is such a multifaceted, amazing company with so many wonderful people in it. I know I speak very highly of it, but I'm very proud of my time, and I'm very proud of still working with them for coming up 18 years now. And we've achieved a lot together and had a great time there. And it's just it was unexpected because, coming from New Zealand, first of all, we had no ancestry or rights or green card access or anything like that. So that was a whole process, and they were willing to take a punt on somebody that's done okay in the UK that may or may not work in the US, and they were willing to put the money on the line, and they bet on Kiwi.
So, in terms of the role that you was it programming that was still kind of the biggest part of your job over there?
Oddly enough, I started in San Francisco. It was the first market we went into, and it was a radio station, Star 1013 or KIOI as they go by call letters over there. And I was in the market for 3 or 4 days. I'd been in the building. I'll rephrase. I'd been in the building for 3 or 4 days, and the morning show host, I should say, Don Blue, was going to be away for a few days, and they went, "You should cover." So the next thing, I'm on there doing a morning show in San Francisco for a grand sum total of 3 days, and that was all they ever needed. But it created an intrigue, and I think there was something hearing an accent on the radio in some markets is fantastic, and other markets it's incredibly hard. And San Francisco is one of those markets that's more open to it than LA, that is incredibly closed for various reasons. And inside of that world of getting into the space at Star 1013 and kind of establishing and understanding a little bit about the marketplace with a lot of data. And that's something that the US have phenomenal amounts of. And I love data. I love research to help me focus on a target audience, or not necessarily down to the music you play, because there's got to be the magic and the science together. You can't just go on data, otherwise it'll all be driven from algorithm, and there wouldn't be people like me and the various others that are in our industry around the world doing their jobs. But that data gives you so much more confidence in some of the questions and decisions that you're looking to make and the direction you take a radio station or a brand or a format. And it doesn't have to be a radio station. It could be anything whatsoever. It could be a startup internet company. It could be anything. You've got some data around you that gives you positive indicators, and you see that if you do this, you end up with more positive indicators. Well, there's a good thing.
So do you want to just talk about the how iHeart in the digital context, because you were there from the sort of what was relatively early for
2007.
For digital audio, and then kind of still there now, and albeit in a different role. How did you kind of start to? How did they start to kind of build that out as a business? Away from terrestrial.
I think everybody realises there is an audience transition, and it's happening in New Zealand the same as it's happening in England and Australia and the UK and US. Or I've already mentioned that. It is just there are platforms. Used to be, here's your AM radio station, here's your FM radio station, and that's it. And you listen to a radio station or multiple radio stations in your day, in your week, or in your month, or whatever. For whatever reason, you'd choose whichever ones. That still happens. There just happens to be a lot more options now. But there's a lot of options in what you listen to, but there's also a lot of options in where you listen to it. So you could be on your phone, you could be on Alexa, you could be on a smart TV, you could be on Freeview. You take your pick. It's a curated brand over a period of time that has built something as a reason for you to want to come back to. It's entertainment, it's fulfillment, it's company and companionship, whatever it happens to be that makes that's the one that you levitate towards for a certain need or want in your life as a form of entertainment or escapism or whatever you want to call it. It gives you that chance to jump into that space. And so I think when we looked at how iHeart was building its digital platforms out, it was just a very early version of recognizing that audience transition was going to change from the terrestrial dial to other locations. And that was it started off just as a purely and simply, here's the FM radio station or the AM radio station, 100% simulcast on a digital platform so you can listen to it on your computer, your PC back in the day. And then it continued to grow, and then you've got all the other things that they work on over there, and there's no secrets in this, that they work with the cell phone manufacturers to make sure they've got the right kind of things happening inside of the app that works for them, and then the platforms, iOS or whatever it happens to be. They also work closely with Ford and Chevy and various car manufacturers to make sure the in-dash experience is part of an extension of the right way for radio to be looking to go forwards, and not just here's your station's frequency, good luck. There's a lot more to it than what you could do in the past. You can do a lot more now.
So thinking about the sort of function of radio, historically it was, one of, if not the most important kind of way of bringing new music to an audience.
Yep.
And unless you were you're a sort of a step forward in terms of being a music fan, if you were to go and buy CDs, and
you're a real lean forward.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So there are these sort of tiers, but for a lot of people, that was how they accessed new music. And as we've moved into a sort of Spotify and on-demand streaming era, the sort of whole kind of conceptual bargain that you have with your audience has sort of changed somewhat. So how has the rise of sort of Spotify and on-demand streaming changed the way that kind of radio understands itself?
You said a word, radio was a platform that broke new music and introduced new music to people. I'm pleased to say radio is still, and by radio I say our audio products still are massively influential in breaking new music and introducing new music to a mainstream audience. Yes, there are absolute music nuts like me. I was sitting there in Flying Nun Records a couple of days ago, flick, 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 looking for things. Going, oh my goodness, this is so cool. I'm flicking through, looking at vinyl again. I love it. But not everyone's going to do that. Not everyone's got the time for that. And so it's a similar thing. Not everyone's going to go searching for new music. At some point, they may hear it on a Spotify playlist if they also use that. And again, that's supplementary or complementary to what's happening in radio. Yes, there's only a certain amount of time people listen to audio, and Spotify, Pandora, Apple Music and the likes, they have taken away some of that potential audience time, but they've also grown the big pool because people are using those mediums more in combination with what they're doing in streaming platforms and radio stations and audio propositions. So the difference for our world is it's a curated brand. And those curated brands have an opportunity to introduce those new songs and give an explanation of what and why and who and how. And it's kind of like getting a blank CD. If you were to walk past someone and someone gives you a CD and you go, listen to this, it's great. We've got no idea what it is, who it is, where it is, or anything like that.
Context piece.
It's a context piece.
It's really hard in the likes of Spotify. And I think, Yeah, that's a really interesting and underrated part of what radio can provide.
It puts it into context, and it fits it in with other things that make sense as well. You're not hearing the new Michael Bublé song on a rock radio station. It's just not, those two things aren't going to happen.
Yeah.
Now, could that happen in Spotify on a playlist? Maybe at a real pinch, probably not. But that was a out of context example. But it means someone's curating a brand to have like-minded people enjoy a specific subset of music and if you and content outside of the music. If you create that pool and you get that out into the audience field, that's a good thing for you. So you become part of that music cycle instead of just sitting on the end of a random playlist.
So before we move into Brian FM, I just wondered if you, as someone who was kind of birthed within the New Zealand radio industry, and are now back here as both a proprietor and I assume a consumer, what is your sort of sense of the kind of health of radio here, and how how it kind of seems as a product, in a broad sense, compared to those kind of much bigger markets that you've experienced?
I think they're on very similar trajectory paths. And not necessarily just when it comes down to audience and profile and whatever. It's the path of how to maximize our digital assets that go along with our terrestrial broadcasts. It's how we find a way to monetize those things and maintain great content. Though nothing's changed in that respect. It might not be that the local station in Wanganui has 8 DJs and 2 engineers and whatever else. The world's changed, technology's changed, and it's afforded us to do things differently. It doesn't mean it's better or worse, it's just different. And I think that is exactly the same in the US to New Zealand. We are here just as much, and in some cases more, and in some cases behind what the US are doing when it comes to creative approaches to produce our products.
The JC2Co Billboard Network delivers quality reach via commanding sites to ensure your campaign is visible and impactful. With superior screen quality and premium locations, JC2Co can help your campaign be seen and be remembered. Visit www.beseenberemembered.co.nz to learn more. So we'll now swing around and go to your basement. And it's really interesting to me because you've had this very long career right at the heart of the global radio industry, and sort of understand and respect and love the kind of rules and codes and the research and how intricately plotted all this stuff is. And then you've gone and created your own thing that seems to disregard almost all of those rules.
And proudly tells everybody it does that.
Yeah. And almost seems disdainful of the rules that you're enforcing with your day job. Explain Brian FM to me to start with.
Brian FM is a fun project. It's an immense amount of enjoyment and entertainment that we get from what we create on our radio station. It started off in one transmitter on the roof of a friend's house in Blenheim and moved to Wanganui and then to Nelson, Ashburton, Timaru, Oamaru, Christchurch. Take it. We've got the South Island covered, and we're creeping our way through the North Island as opportunities afford, and as we can afford opportunities as well. Because quite frankly, it's not a cheap exercise to bolt transmitters to hills. That's expensive.
So tell me about that. It is a really different approach, kind of. If you listen to Brian FM for any period of time, you'll notice it's not like the other ones. And it's got these sort of 4 simple rules that you seem pretty committed to. Do you want to sort of run through those and then explain why you went about it this way?
The first rule is there's no DJs because they get in the way of the music. The second rule is there's no commercials because they get in the way of the music. The third rule is we play what we feel like. The fourth rule is no requests. Refer to rule 3. We play what we feel like. You're welcome to listen. And we might be a great thing for you to listen to, and you may not like us. That's okay. But we are creating a rather unique brand proposition and a rather unique radio station that just its main focus primarily is to act, feel, and at some point be commercialized similar to a streaming platform, not a traditional terrestrial radio station. Because if we chose the no DJs path and the no long commercial breaks path and all those kind of things, we are actually not in the same space as a traditional radio station. Yes, we happen to have FM transmitters and a lot of them, but we also have our digital platforms, and we're competing in that space for the ears, hearts, and minds of the consumers who are looking for a different offering of a lot of music, some anecdotal stuff that happens. So yes, we do have things set on the radio. It's not like it's just here's a playlist, there's nothing happens, here's a commercial. We don't do that. We've got a brand that we've built with a wonderful set of people who help us with creative writing and production and all those things that make bits between songs stand out and have an impact. So we've got smart ass lines, we've got serious lines, we've got thought-provoking lines, we've got a couple that are kind of insulting. It's not very often a radio station puts its listeners down, but we're not good enough for everybody, but we're good enough for you as one of our lines. That's a fun line. You go, hang on, who said? Did you just say that? And there's some others I'm not going to repeat on this because you'll have to listen.
So I mean, it is interesting to me that dig into why you took this path, why you sort of. Your day job is respecting the rules of radio and your night job is disrespecting them.
I think my day job was breaking some of the rules of radio as well. It wasn't just following the mold that everyone else has done.
No.
Because if you did, then you end up with all the radio stations selling the same. We were trying to find ways within parameters. And those parameters were a lot more like on a bowling lane when you've got your kids there for the first time, the little side rails come up.
Yeah.
If you're going 10-pin bowling. You've only got certain parameters you can go within. But where you are on the lane and what you do in that space and how often you're there, it helps make a brand have a feel or an essence or how risque it is. We just took those little bumper bars away, and we're going to be a little bit wider than that. We're still going to have things that we have to adhere to, but we just wanted to open the scope up a lot more. So it gave us a chance to, in a low-risk environment when we first started, play and experiment. And if it didn't work, well, at the end of the day, it'd cost us, a few grand, obviously, yes, and transmitters and frequencies and LPFM we started off with and whatever else. And if that didn't work, then we'll just turn the power off. We'll go do something else. But it got a fair amount of attention in a short space of time for a small radio station sitting on a friend's roof in Blenheim. And we went, okay, let's go a bit more serious than this. Let's get some investment behind it, and let's take it to bolting the transmitter to the hill instead of on the house. And let's make it, instead of 1 watt, let's make it 500 watts or whatever it was that the license was allowed to through radio spectrum management and the likes. And when we did that, it was a whole new level of engagement and feedback, and through our socials and through the email and whatever else, of people banging on the door or someone going, hey, this BrianFM lot, how do we get involved? And that natural growth just happened and inspired us to continue the growth.
So you just gave a bunch of sort of anecdotal evidence of its success, but you're not part of the survey, is that correct?
No, we choose not to be part of the survey purposely, because all that'll do is put a cost to our bottom line that will go straight through to our partners. There's no benefit for us.
So you're someone who once loves data and then issues it in the local
market. Caught out on a technicality.
But I am curious, how do you, you're running it so lean.
Yes, we are.
And, without ads, how are you commercializing it, and how are you able to kind of continually step out the growth? Because radio frequencies aren't cheap.
No, they're not. No, that's the most expensive part of the operation, is the radio frequencies. And then you've got the typical things like physical hardware to make it go, servers and processors and blah, 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 and internet connections and electricity and whatever else, and then a location to put all those things. We chose a path where we wanted to have a brand that could stand on its own 2 feet, be quite Kiwi and irreverent and different, but also something that wasn't out of control when it comes to costs. I think we've all seen evidence of media platforms, radio stations, television stations, whatever it happens to be, where the infrastructure costs become so high that it's never going to be profitable, it's never going to be sustainable, and they inevitably go away. And we didn't want to do that. If we were going to do this, we needed to make sure we didn't overstep our marks. And quite frankly, it's funded by myself and my wife to start with. And at that point you go, hey, that's our money there. We don't want to spend a whole lot of it and waste it. I'd rather buy a new car than have a radio station that lasted 8 months and vanished off into the distance. So we needed to make sure we had a sustainable business model. And from that, we found ways to bring partners along who can help with that sustainability. And we integrate them and incorporate them into our brand in a way that's just different. We don't run 30-second commercials. and we don't take a voice from, I don't know, pick a client or a brand that you're used to hearing. We work with our partners who come to us. We don't have a sales team. Everyone who's on the radio station comes to us. And when they do that, first of all, we've had a huge amount of any barrier of entry gone, because they've come to us going, hey, we want to find out about you. We're not expensive. And it's the multiples that help us become sustainable. So that's why we continue to grow, because it helps us with that brand expansion of audience and opportunities for our partners. And then the listeners go, sweet, this is good. Hey, you guys have rocked up. So we've expanded 3 more markets in the last 8-9 months.
So, commercial radio in New Zealand's dominated by 2 companies, NZME and MediaWorks, and, who both do, they're not identical by any means. They've got differentiated brands, but they operate in a fairly similar style. And you're off doing this fairly wildcat thing a long way from what they do in multiple ways. How have they responded to your arrival?
I think they're more worried about our audience. I was going to say the word acquisition, but our audience growth. I think they're more worried about that than they are our impact to their revenues.
Have you ever heard, because you might not pay for research, but they sure do.
Oh, they do, yeah.
And do you ever get sort of little leaks out from behind that curtain?
I would never say that I've seen any information like that. Look, I love data, and there's publicly released data, and it's very simple data to read. And you go through a marketplace and you look at a Nelson or something like that, which was one of our first markets where we were rated, and expensive to get into and expensive to run, but it's gone exceptionally well for us in the 7 years we've been there now. You add up the radio stations that are there, and there's a gap that's not reported.
And so
it doesn't equal 100.
BrianFM.
Well, it's us and others that may fall into that fold. There's an access radio station there that used to pull about a 2 share. Well, if you go other and you take away the networks and whatever else, the rest of the market's about a 20 share.
Right. So that's quite a big share.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a notable number. And then we don't go and sell it because we're sold out in Nelson. So what's the point?
So, you're doing this, and it's outside of what they're doing, but they do seem to be paying attention. Channel X was a sort of, that obviously came about very abruptly after the end of Today FM, and a lot of people at the time and subsequently have noted its kind of similarities conceptually and in some respects in terms of the playlisting to what you're doing. What do you make of the sort of the Brianing of, or an attempted Brianing of
Channel Brian? I've never called it that before. It just sounded funny as I heard it in my head then. Look, at the end of the day, there are competitors in all walks of life doing things that are trying to take away an opportunity that you may have at this point in time or you've afforded yourself, and there's a competitor trying to take that space. If you look at yourselves, there's other people doing podcasts and doing political stance views and whatever there happens to be.
We don't like to acknowledge that.
But
there might be.
Unfortunately, I'm somewhere out there must. I'm sure there is if we
One
look. We might
two,
find. Yeah, exactly.
They'll give up soon,
but exactly right. Well, you used an operative phrase there. It took 13 years and a number of years for us in markets where the networks could see demonstrable data of what we were doing to pick up on the idea that actually maybe they got something there. And, what is it? Is it I'm trying to think of the right phrase. It's the ultimate form of flattery.
Imitation?
Thank you very much. Imitation is the ultimate form of flattery. And that's kind of what they're doing. And so be it. That's their prerogative. They've got a network of radio frequencies that they want to try and do something with, just like we have. We've got a different approach. I believe whilst there's a similarity between the two, there's some vast differences as well.
So talk about the differences. The chief
I'm not going to help them program their radio station.
Well, but unfortunately, the thing with radio stations is that they're very public.
Yep. They
can listen to them. The way that the playlists are assembled and the kind of vastness and the fact that there is just this extreme tolerance for a breadth of playlisting that is, just give us a sense of that.
I think that's actually we've got to have some thank yous going out to Spotify and Apple Music and the likes, because inside of their playlist algorithms, they spike in things and introduce music to people, or reintroduce, I think is a better word, because we're gold-based predominantly for these kind of memories. And that's opened up an opportunity for some songs to pop back up again. You look at, I'm trying to think of the name of the TV show that brought back Kate Bush. Yeah.
Stranger Things.
Yeah, that was it. Yes, I'm a huge Kate Bush fan. I never thought in my life that I would play a Kate Bush song on a large radio station in the US. And yet I had it on 4 radio stations in one market at the same time. And they were like, hang on, 1, 2, 3. 3 radio stations. No, 4 radio stations. 102.7 Kiss FM LA, 104.3 My FM, 103.5 Coast FM, and 98.7 Alt 98.7. All 4 stations were playing an 80s average hit from Kate Bush. Now, that's other platforms have opened up that opportunity and afforded that opportunity and brought back that artist in a capacity. And we just capitalise on some of those kind of opportunities around with playlists.
That feels like it's underselling the extent to which you're really sprawling in terms of what you playlist at Brian, and whereas that was quite that was a huge pop cultural hit. And,
it was, yes.
And it was aberrant in a lot of different ways, while also instructive about the kind of current media technology ecosystem. What you're doing is all over the shop.
It is, yes. We're a little bit more random than that. But if you were to listen to, again, Kiss FM in LA, normally you'd have nothing like that. It would have been the Taylor, the Katie, the Dua Lipas, and the whatever you want to put into that mix, the Weekend and whoever. And suddenly you've got a Kate Bush song. It sounded out of place. And I quite like those train wrecks. And as we go back to Brian, the whole phrase "playing what we feel like" is really what we feel like. It's down to, well, I quite like Edwin Starr, so there's a few of us involved in what we choose, but at the end of the day, I sit there and do playlists, and we go, I like Edwin Starr, I'm going to play that. I like Creedence Clearwater Revival, I'm going to play that. I like the Eagles, but not every song, so I'll pick a couple of theirs. Hang on, 21 Pilots new track, I really like that. Oh, actually, they've got a song going back a little while. It was never really a single, called Cancer. It's a magnificent song. Wasn't a single. It was just a track they kind of dropped in between albums. It's brilliant. We played that for months and months and still do now. It's just about, we like music. The whole reason for Brian coming about was music. It started at that. Hey, we like a lot of songs and we don't hear them on the radio. Oh, man, we should do something about that. And then we had to find a way to make a business model out of it that was sustainable.
So to finish up, you built this thing from the ground up. It's now pretty large and it still feels like it's expanding. Hasn't quite reached, like, the big city frequencies are obviously the most expensive, and it's a question you'll get very frequently, I'm sure. But
yes, we do.
What is the end game with this? Like, if I'm sure that you've already been approached by NZME and MediaWorks with to take it off your hands, but clearly that hasn't happened. Where do you want to see this go?
Whilst we're having fun and we're creating a point of difference and we're getting gratification and enjoyment out of what we're doing, then we continue doing what we're doing. Our path is growth. We've recently launched in, the markets we're in, like I said, with the full South Island now. We've recently launched 3 or 4 weeks ago into Queenstown. We purchased a frequency for there. February was Marston and Wairarapa. Before that, kind of August, September, somewhere last year, was Mosgiel and Balclutha and into Dunedin. And we've still got more frequencies we own that are not activated yet. So we'll continue as we, it's like anything. You can't go out and, buy a new car if you haven't got the money in the bank. Well, you can. You put yourself in a lot of debt and you've got to find a way to leverage that appropriately. And we do exactly that. We've got a fine line between, hey, we're broke. Oh, we're good. Oh, we're broke. Oh, we're good. And when we're not broke, we go and buy more transmitters and put them on hills and expand our footprint. So that's our goal, is to continue growing. As for the likes of an Auckland or wherever it happens to be for a frequency, if someone rang the doorbell, we'd have a conversation. But there are no frequencies available.
Yeah, and I assume that's a very deliberate thing.
If there was frequencies available, they would have a price tag on there that would mean, hey, Duncan, you got any spare cash, like a couple of hundred, a few thousands, million, a few million in the back pocket there? We'll borrow that from you. That's not our world. I don't know if we'll ever be on a terrestrial radio station in Auckland or Wellington. I didn't think we'd have Christchurch, Dunedin and Invercargill. We've got them covered. So who knows? You never say never, but it is what it is. But if we look at our streaming, the number one streaming market for us is Auckland. Well, go figure. And you get people who go, oh, it's down south. I found you guys, and now I'm living here, ... Ponsonby, or wherever it happens to be, and I stream you all the time. I'm in the car, I stream you. And I'm like, well, that's the way of the world now. That device enables people to choose their entertainment, be it AM, FM, as a terrestrial radio station, or as a platform like ours, or if it's a streaming platform like a Spotify or Pandora.
So just one thing that struck me is that there's this confounding thing to people outside of radio who are all used to sort of essentially kind of trying to forecast when the legacy thing will end and will be fully switched over to digital. And, the likes of, most TV networks are sort of baking in like a 2030-ish end to the transmission of linear as we know it. There have been various kind of predictions around when print newspapers will kind of be turned off, that kind of thing. You're investing, you're buying frequency, so you clearly have to have some level of confidence that that's not going to happen. But radio just doesn't seem to be on that path. Why is it that it resists the sort of sense of inevitability? Even as you're building these, I do acknowledge that there is digital broadcast, but it doesn't seem to be at the expense of terrestrial radio in the same way that it is with other formats.
There will become at some point in time a tipping point, and we're nowhere near that yet. We're at a point where the terrestrial broadcast is still the most prolifically used stream or consumption, I should say, of our products, and the streams are catching. There's no doubt about that. And every brand, every age profile, every owner of their assets will be monitoring their own trajectory and path of where that is. I still believe that we could start a streaming platform and spend a lot of money putting up billboards or doing digital marketing or whatever else to try and amass an audience, because you have to have an audience to find a way to monetize it, and these things take time. Or you turn on an FM radio station and people who've already got their FM radios and flicking around the dial come across you, and suddenly they adopt you. And that's a very effective way for us to amass an audience at this point in time. So we'll continue doing that. As for the other networks, they've got their paths and their angles they're taking on things as well. So it's not like we're the only ones buying frequencies, but I think in the last, since 2014, by far and away, we would have bought the most.
Well, it's a really impressive and original kind of New Zealand media story, and kind of nice to have one that's on the up. I have to say, given that's not always a theme of this podcast.
Well, any of your consumers who happen to look after large national brands or agencies, Brian at BrianFM.com, hit us up.
Well, yeah, because you've been up talking to agencies.
I have been, yes.
Yeah. I assume that they're all avid listeners.
You know what? Yes. It's kind of interesting because, like I said, Auckland is our most prolific streaming marketplace, which in itself is, I find really fulfilling, because we're not here on any other platform. So that means they've come across us through word of mouth or friends or travel and experience into one of the markets that we're in and discovered us. But they don't know how to work with us, and they don't know what we are and who we are and how we kind of could work with some of their brands. And that's the reason that I just thought, I don't live in LA anymore. I live in, a different part of the world. So why don't I come and see some folks and actually go, hey, you know what? This is what we do. Oh, we already know about you. Well, do you know this? No. And here we go. So it may open some doors. Who knows? It may have closed some as well permanently.
Well, I hope they are open. And yeah, thanks so much for coming up today and telling the story.
Thank you for the invite. It was unexpected and I really appreciate it. So thank you.
Seeing is not enough. With optimized data tools and insights, the JC2Co Billboard Network helps brands be remembered. Dedicated to closing the loop between impression and action, JC2Co can help your campaign be seen and be remembered. Visit www.beseenberemembered.co.nz to learn more.